Hello, let's talk about GameStonk, as Elon Musk recently tweeted. To understand GameStonk and what's going on with GameStop in the stock markets generally, you need to know about call options and you need to know about shorting stocks. And conveniently, now you know about both of these things. So, what happened? So, initially, a bunch of hedge fund managers who are generally very smart. They're no dummies. They started taking a lot of short positions in GameStop. There were so many hedge fund managers doing this with such conviction that at one point 140% of the float of GameStop was being shorted. The float is the number of shares. It's not the number of shares outstanding. It's a subset of that. It's the number of shares outstanding that are able to be freely and conveniently traded over exchanges like the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange or something like that through brokers like Robinhood or Interactive Brokers. So if 140% of the float is shorted, that's more than the conveniently available number of shares of the company. So what happened? Some very smart individual investors got together and figured out if they could buy a whole lot of GameStop, irrespective of any fundamental analysis of the company, if they got together and bought a whole bunch of GameStop, they could drive the price up. And this could be powered by two very interesting things. So we start with the way the two very interesting things work are we start with all these hedge funds having the shares shorted. So a bunch of the subreddit folks from Wall Street Bets start buying and buying and buying shares. And the way that they're doing that often is to buy very short term, out of the money calls. And so let's say GameStop is at 100, so they would buy a call that gave them the right but not the obligation to buy GameStop at 120 in 5 days or less. And that's fine. And so the option dealer who's handling this contract, what she's going to do is she's going to sell the contract to the individual investor. And then what she's going to do simultaneously is she's going to go out immediately and buy a share of GameStop for 100. And she's in actually a really good position, right? Assuming that GameStop doesn't just completely crash. So if GameStop doesn't go up too much, she sold the contract, so she makes the money on the contract. And if GameStop does go up a whole bunch, she's already bought the stock at 100. So if it goes up to 500, she can sell at the contract price without really any risk. So what happened was GameStop did, of course, start going up a whole lot. So a bunch of people were doing this with call options. A bunch of people were doing this just by buying shares. So as the price goes up and more of these options are being purchased, these option dealers need to buy more and more shares of GameStop, and that drives up the price of GameStop more and more. So when the stock moves up in this way, that's what's called a gamma squeeze, when it's caused by the purchasing of out of the money call options, and then the option dealer goes ahead to hedge their position and buy shares of the stock. So that's the first thing that happened. That's called a gamma squeeze. And then the second thing that happened is called a short squeeze. And all a short squeeze is when the price of a stock goes up so much that the people who are shorted feel like, oh my God, I can't handle these losses anymore. So let's say very smart hedge fund manager X, when GameStop is 100, shorts a whole bunch of it. And then he turns out to be wrong and the price of GameStop goes up to 500. He starts saying, oh my God, this could go up to 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, and I could be totally wiped out. I can have infinite losses on this thing. So I better go ahead and cover my short. And what do you have to do to end a short contract? You have to buy a share. So now all these folks who were short and they're getting scared because the price is going up they're rushing in and buying shares to close their positions. And what does that do? It drives up the price even more. So that's a short squeeze. So in short, those are the two things that caused the recent GameStonk brouhaha. Okay, that's it for now. I'll also attach an interesting reading or two on this subject for you. Take care.